How much money did Fairfield make off Bernie Madoff every year?
Hundreds of millions of dollars.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're looking at people who were written off as insane or wrong, only to be proven right the entire time.
Unfortunately, his peers weren't very receptive. There was no mechanism to explain how the continents might plow through the oceans.
Frances Oldham Kelsey. When she was hired to work for the Food and Drug Administration, neither she nor the country knew what the extent of her work would lead to. In 1960, Frances Oldham Kelsey was tasked with reviewing thalidomide so that it could be prescribed to expecting mothers suffering from morning sickness. She denied it and eventually asked that it be tested after finding evidence that it caused birth defects.
The problem is some drugs may not show a toxicity until they've been used for several years.
Meanwhile, the pharmaceutical company refused her request. They grew angry with her and hounded her relentlessly for approval.
They first tried to convince her to approve the drug over a series of calls and visits. When these failed to sway her, Merrill executives complained that stubborn and nitpicking Kelsey was the problem.
Her research was corroborated just a year later, when thousands of infants were born with severe defects. In that moment, her discretion became the expectation, and by 1962, her reviewing process was the norm for all prospective drugs.
Dr. Kelsey was hailed as a heroine in the United States.
Cecilia Payne-Gaposchkin. Science is an ever-evolving field, and as such, those that were once considered wrong can be proven right once more evidence arises. Cecilia Payne-Gaposchkin learned that for herself in 1925, while she was a graduate student at Radcliffe College working at the Harvard College Observatory. After extensive research, she came to the conclusion that stars were primarily made up of the elements hydrogen and helium.
Thanks to your work, I've discovered that the stars are made almost entirely of hydrogen and helium. There's 1,000,000 times more hydrogen and helium than the metals in the stars.
This went against the accepted reasoning at the time, and as such, several established astrophysicists disregarded her findings.
It is clearly impossible that hydrogen should be 1,000,000 times more abundant than the metals.
Years later, more studies on the subject were conducted, where it was revealed that her hypothesis had been correct the entire time. With that confirmation, all of her hard work and the dissent she had faced was finally made worth it.
It would be 4 years before Russell realized that Payne was right. To his credit, as soon as he did, he acknowledged that it was her discovery.
Lindy Chamberlain. In 1980, her worst nightmare became reality. During a camping trip that year, Lindy and Michael Chamberlain's daughter, Azaria, disappeared from their tent. Lindy insisted it was a dingo, but the authorities had another theory, that she had been the one to take her child's life.
I really couldn't believe the evidence of my own eyes, and I called to Michael that dingo's got the baby.
The media picked the accusation up and ran with it. Everything from her religion to her reactions following the disappearance were picked apart. She was convicted in 1982 and sentenced to life behind bars.
The verdict in Mrs. Chamberlain's case, guilty. For Mr. Chamberlain, guilty.
It wasn't until 1986 that more of Azaria's remains were found, corroborating Lindy's initial claims, leading to her release. While she was exonerated, her true vindication came in 2012, when a coroner finally declared that Azaria's cause of death was a dingo attack.
Please accept my sincere sympathy on the death of your special and loved daughter and sister, Azaria. I'm so sorry for your loss.
Jose Canseco. As the old proverb goes, winners never cheat and cheaters never win. In Major League Baseball, that wasn't the case. And it took Jose Canseco speaking out for the truth to be revealed. In his 2005 book, Juiced, he detailed using performance-enhancing drugs during his career. He also claimed that other players used them as well, and even named them.
You say this: I would never have been a major league caliber player without steroids, right?
Oh, well, it is a true statement. No ifs and buts about it.
Those athletes immediately denied the claims, painting Canseco as a liar. The Mitchell report being released in 2007 changed everything. It laid out every detail of a nearly 2-year-long investigation into the league, including the names of dozens of players who had used enhancers. Some of the teammates Canseco called out were named, proving that he had been right the whole time.
It can make an average athlete a super athlete.
Russ Tice. No citizen wants to believe that their government would ever spy on them. In 2005, intelligence analyst Russ Tice claimed just that. It all began in 2003 when Tice himself suspected he was being tracked.
It didn't matter whether you were in Kansas, in the middle of the country, and you never made a communication or a foreign communications at all. They monitored all communications.
After voicing those concerns, he was forced to undergo a psychological evaluation, and he knew then and there that he was being punished for coming forward. By May of 2005, he had been fired. He continued speaking out, and it wouldn't take long for him to be proven right.
That's really disgraceful. You got to back it up, your accusations, my man.
Disgraceful? Disgraceful? Over that hill is an agency that spied on every American in this country.
On December 17, 2005, President Bush confirmed that he had given the National Security Agency clearance to do so. Tice was vindicated even more with the release of Edward Snowden's evidence in 2013, cementing his claims a decade prior as the truth.
Because even if you're not doing anything wrong, you're being watched and recorded, and the storage capability of these systems increases every year.
John O'Neill. After living through one attack, he was adamant to stop the next.
He'd painstakingly pieced together bits of information gathered from sources around the world.
Unfortunately, he was the only one who believed it would happen. After helping apprehend one of the perpetrators of the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center, John O'Neill had just one thought, that if it occurred once, it could occur again. He became obsessed with studying terrorist cells and their motivations, all while continuing to issue warnings about another attack potentially taking place.
My dad had a lot of video of Osama bin Laden. Whatever was out there was actually in his apartment. He studied him several times, watched the videos I know several times.
Even after he left the FBI, he maintained his position. On September 11, 2001, his horrific prediction was proven correct. He lost his life that day while helping others escape. A horrible end that could have been prevented had the agency listened to him years beforehand.
In the aftermath, what John O'Neill had come so tantalizingly close to discovering became clear.
Louis Pasteur. Like other scientists, his initial findings were not always accepted. During the 1860s, Louis Pasteur tried understanding why wine was spoiling. Through some experimentation, he deduced that the issue was microorganisms creating lactic acid. He also found that when certain affected liquids were heated, the organisms were eradicated. This new process, dubbed pasteurization, wasn't accepted at first. Semmelweis scoffed at the idea and insisted that the impacted taste caused by the process was worse than the potential for illness. It was disregarded for decades until people began contracting diseases caused by contaminated milk in the early 20th century. Once pasteurization was done on a mass scale, those instances dropped significantly. It was then that many realized that Pasteur had been right from the very beginning. Rachel Carson. In some cases, being right doesn't always come with a feeling of vindication. For some, like Rachel Carson, it meant that something awful was taking place. In the conservationist's case, she was worried about the potential negative effects of the pesticide DDT. She published a book on the topic in 1962, where she revealed the potential dangers it posed to humans and the environment.
In the zealous quest for mastery, Carson argued, synthetic pesticides had been used indiscriminately, excessively, heedlessly, upsetting the delicate balance of nature and putting all life at risk.
To say it was poorly received would be an understatement. From having vicious insults lobbed at her to people writing parodies mocking her findings, she was dragged through the mud.
They formed essentially a war council to get together and develop a propaganda campaign to discredit Carson, to discredit the science in her book, and to defend their practices.
Years after it was released, more tests were carried out, which revealed how dangerous DDT was. It was officially banned in the United States in 1972, a full decade after Carson's initial warning.
Her message was that there's an ongoing story. It doesn't just stop with the removal of pesticides.
Harry Markopolos. Had he been listened to, billions of dollars may have been saved. Instead, Harry Markopolos was all but ignored when he reported several red flags within financier Bernie Madoff's portfolio. When initial press coverage didn't result in an investigation, he knew he had to try again.
One of the most successful businessmen in New York, and certainly one of the most powerful men on Wall Street, you would never suspect him of fraud, unless you knew the math.
He filed a second complaint to the SEC, which was also ignored. Markopolos persevered, even though he knew he was putting himself at risk. He sent one final memo in 2005, only for that to go nowhere as well.
I would talk to the people I had trading relationships with and ask, did you have a trading relationship with Mr. Bernard Madoff? And they all said, no, we don't think he's for real.
Afterwards, all he could do was watch as Madoff's scheme folded in 2008. He took to the stand the following year, where he finally lambasted those that had ignored his warnings for so many years.
But today he enjoys an almost heroic status, pursued by journalists and movie producers and honored by colleagues as the man who went to the Securities and Exchange Commission and blew the whistle on Bernie Madoff and his $50 billion fraud.
Alfred Wegener.
He realized that all the continents in the world had once formed a giant single landmass that he called Pangaea.
Most people today are aware of Pangaea, a giant landmass that broke apart. What some don't know is that the alleged process it underwent, known as continental drift, was once considered a farce. In 1912, Alfred Wegener proposed that each individual continent drifted into their new positions.
Over hundreds of millions of years, Pangaea had split apart, and its jigsaw pieces had drifted to their present locations.
To prove his case, he showed that life forms on opposite ends of the globe were similar, and used paper to create a visual representation. However, due to a lack of precision and experience, he was derided by geologists. Decades passed, and scientists began finding more evidence supporting Wegener's theory. Though it isn't fully confirmed, enough has come out to deduce that he had an early understanding of how the phenomenon may have worked.
Due to the constant churning of magma underneath the Earth's crust, they all split up and moved to their modern-day positions.
Billy Mitchell. Before Tom Cruise made jets sexy, Billy Mitchell was shouting from the rooftops about their importance. Air power, he believed, was the future of warfare.
Battle came after the war, when he attacked his own military superiors in a controversy that shocked the nation.
A U.S. Army general with the subtlety of a howitzer, Mitchell spent the 1920s warning that aircraft would revolutionize combat. He also told anyone that would listen that America's Navy was dangerously vulnerable. When he literally bombed a captured battleship from the air to prove his point, the military brass court-martialed him for insubordination.
But the court hears the prosecutor call Mitchell an ambitious opportunist. He's a danger to military discipline, the prosecutor says. Throw him out of the Army.
He resigned as a colonel, frustrated by the Army ignoring him. 15 years later, Japanese planes sank battleships at Pearl Harbor, just like Mitchell had predicted. Christine Collins. When Christine Collins' 9-year-old son went missing in 1928, she did everything a mother could. She contacted the police, launched a search, and held out hope.
I'm calling to report a missing child. Missing child.
What's your relation to the child, ma'am?
It's my son.
Months later, the LAPD made a big show of finding him for the papers, but there was one wrinkle. The boy they presented to Christine was not her kid. When she protested, they tossed her into a psych ward. They held her under a Code 12, a psych hold for annoying or inconvenient people. The boy was indeed an imposter, part of a police cover-up to hide their massive incompetence. Sadly, her real son was never found.
Still think he's out there?
Why not? 3 boys made a run for it that night, Detective, and if one got out, then maybe either or both of the others did too. Maybe Walter's out there having the same fears that he did.
Collins spent years fighting for justice and died without ever finding her son. William Coley. William Coley believed he could potentially cure cancer by giving people infections. It may sound insane, and his contemporaries accused him of worse.
And so he hypothesized that maybe there was some kind of connection between whatever was happening during or after an infection and cancer disappearing.
But he wasn't crazy. After one of his patients' tumors shrank following a serious infection, Coley leaned all the way in. He injected cancer patients with a cocktail of dead bacteria to supercharge their immune systems. The results were inconsistent, but sometimes he produced miracles. Instead of celebrating him, the medical establishment rolled its eyes and tossed his work aside in favor of surgery and radiation. Today, Coley is seen as the godfather of immunotherapy, one of the most promising frontiers in cancer treatment.
This whole process is enhanced when the immune system is boosted. And that's exactly what Coley's toxins were doing.
The Cancer Research Institute even named an award after him, Rose McGowan. For years, Rose McGowan was just the girl from Charmed to most people.
Did you ever try to meet the sisters? Ask them about it, or?
Yeah, right.
After all, when the show ended, her career didn't exactly blossom. That's because behind the scenes, she was fighting a darker battle. McGowan was one of the first women in Hollywood to publicly accuse Harvey Weinstein of misconduct. She did so long before Me Too became a movement, and long before anyone else stood up to back her story. Instead of support, she was gaslit, blacklisted, and smeared by powerful PR machines. Weinstein even allegedly hired ex-Mossad agents to dig up dirt on her.
These are people that hurt people, and that's their job. Their job is to hurt other people, so, I hope they're proud at night.
While others stayed silent, she kept shouting, forcing the industry to reckon with its rot. Rose was vindicated in 2018. William Harvey. For most of human history, so-called experts believed that blood just sloshed around inside of you. Doctors believed blood was created in the liver and just kind of soaked into the body.
We don't know exactly when Harvey realized he had discovered the circulation of the blood. We do know he was very surprised and taken aback by this, because it contradicted all the teaching about medicine and about the functioning of the body for 2,000 years.
William Henry looked at centuries of medical wisdom and said, well, actually, the heart's a pump. He believed that blood circulates in a loop driven by the heart. Almost no one believed him. His colleagues mocked him, his patients ditched him. Some folks even accused him of heresy.
Most physicians who read it thought it was nonsense, indeed heretical. How could William Harvey, an Englishman, oppose the views of the great Galen? And they wrote against him.
But Harvey kept cutting open animals, taking measurements, and publishing the receipts. It took decades, but he was eventually proven correct. Today, his circulatory model is in every textbook, and his detractors are lost to time. Barry Marshall. Imagine being so sure you're right that you drink a glass of bacteria to prove it.
The concept of discovering a new bacteria which proved that all the medical books were wrong and had to be rewritten, that was kind of exciting to us.
That's exactly what Barry Marshall did in the 1980s. Marshall was trying to convince the medical world that ulcers were not caused by stress or spicy food. He believed the culprit was H. pylori, a nasty little bacterium. Doctors laughed him off for years, clinging to outdated theories while their patients suffered. So, Marshall did something insane. He infected himself, developed gastritis, and then cured it with antibiotics. It was a mic drop moment, earning Marshall a Nobel Prize. He didn't just change how we treat ulcers, he put his money where his mouth is to prove he was right.
The discovery by Dr. Warren and myself has benefited millions of people. Maybe saved 1 million lives over the last 10 years or 20 years.
Ludwig Boltzmann. Ludwig Boltzmann believed atoms were real. That may sound obvious now, but in the 19th century, it was scientific heresy. He spent his days crunching the math, writing equations to describe the behavior of particles. His work laid the foundation for modern statistical mechanics. At the time, though, Boltzmann was a laughingstock. Despite having the math to back it up, Boltzmann spent much of his career isolated and ridiculed. Tragically, he took his own life in 1906. Just a few years later, atomic theory was vindicated, and his work became a cornerstone of modern physics. Alice Catherine Evans. If history and modern life tells us anything, it's that women often have to fight twice as hard to prove they're right. Alice Catherine Evans is a prime example. While studying bacteria in dairy, Evans discovered that Brucella, a particularly nasty microbe, could be transmitted from cows to humans through unpasteurized milk. Raw milk, she realized, could kill. When she went public, male scientists dismissed her findings as, quote, alarmist. The scientific establishment couldn't admit that they were wrong and a woman was right. Years later, after thousands got sick and her research was confirmed, the U.S. finally mandated milk pasteurization. Evans didn't just change food safety. She was a trailblazer for women in science, even as the men around her curdled with resentment. Mayor Kotoku Wamura. After World War II, the town of Fudai, Japan elected Kotoku Wamura as mayor, hoping he'd rebuild. They obviously liked what they saw, re-electing him over and over until 1987. Wamura remembered Fudai getting hammered by a tsunami back in 1933.
He saw the damage after a tsunami in 1933 and vowed it would never happen again.
They were hit by another decades before that. The mayor vowed it would never happen again. In the 1970s, he pushed through a massive 51-foot floodgate. It was a controversial public works project mocked as overkill. Critics said it ruined the view. Wamura insisted. He died in 1997, but he was eventually proven right when the 2011 tsunami devastated much of Japan's coast. Fudai, though, was spared.
Villagers are coming to his grave to pay their respects, and give thanks that he had the foresight to save them.
The wall he built, the one everyone laughed at, saved the entire town. Marshall McLuhan. Back in the 1960s, Marshall McLuhan must have sounded like a raving madman. Listening to him in 2025 feels like witnessing a decades-old lecture from a time-traveling media studies professor.
I don't use concepts. I use percepts. I seek to perceive, not to conceive what's in front of me. And perception is exploration.
Decades before anything close to modern mass media came to fruition, he predicted it all. The rise of the internet, meme culture, and media/political echo chambers. The medium is the message he warned, and most people just blinked in confusion. McLuhan saw it coming. That technology would reshape not just communication, but consciousness itself. He was dismissed as an academic weirdo with a flair for buzzwords. Now, we're living in his global village, hypnotized by screens, shaped by algorithms, and still not quite getting the message.
Danger is of the very element that we live in the 20th century, and extinction is the immediate possibility every hour of the day.
John Yudkin. In the 1970s, nutritionist John Yudkin dropped a bombshell. Sugar, and not fat, was the real driver of heart disease, obesity, and diabetes.
And he gave lots of correlative data, saying sugar's the problem and we need to reduce our consumption.
His 1972 book, Pure, White, and Deadly, made the case. Sadly, the shockingly powerful sugar industry wasn't about to let that narrative take hold.
I'd be very happy if everybody ate 4 pounds of sugar a year. They eat 100 pounds.
They smeared Yudkin's reputation, buried his research, and propped up the fat is bad ethos in pop culture. Their accomplices in the food industry flooded shelves with low-fat, sugar-loaded products, fueling a global health crisis. Decades later, study after study proved Yudkin right. Sugar is a silent killer.
The Journal of the American Medical Association reveals that scientists were paid in the 1960s to play down the link between sugar and heart disease and instead make saturated fat the culprit.
Once dismissed as a crank, he's now recognized as a trailblazer in nutritional science. If only the world had listened sooner. Bennet Omalu. Today, it's widely understood that the brains of star athletes can sometimes be ticking time bombs. Repeated head trauma can lead to chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE.
At 28, to start experiencing memory problems and cognitive changes was quite alarming.
You may be surprised to learn then that the man who discovered CTE in NFL athletes received more than a little pushback.
What were some of the things people called you back then?
That insinuated I was a voodoo doctor, that I was fraudulent.
Forensic pathologist Bennet Omalu's study of former NFL players should have been groundbreaking. Instead, the NFL tried to bury it. In 2005, Omalu's research linking repeated head trauma to long-term brain damage was initially asked to be retracted and met with ridicule.
What do they want?
Your head on a spike.
They want you to retract your findings.
They want you to say you made it all up.
I made it up.
Further findings were dismissed and/or met with outright denial. But as more ex-players suffered from memory loss, aggression, and tragic self-harm, the truth became undeniable. The league was forced to acknowledge the dangers of concussions, leading to massive lawsuits and game-changing reforms.
You have rejuvenated my hope, and together by faith, we shall do great things. The impossible shall become possible. Thank you so much. Thank you. This is the box.
Ernest Hemingway. Ernest Hemingway was one of the greatest writers of the 20th century. Sadly, he spent his final years in a paranoid spiral, convinced that the FBI was watching him. Friends and family thought his paranoia was a symptom of his declining mental health, and he was subjected to multiple unsuccessful electroshock treatments.
They put the electrodes to your head and you know it's coming, and it's like being electrocuted 20 times.
It turns out, though, that he was right. Declassified documents later revealed that J. Edgar Hoover's FBI had been tailing Hemingway for years. They had monitored his movements and wiretapped his phone due to suspected ties with Cuba. Ironically, Hemingway had reportedly dabbled in espionage himself. He's suspected to have done some spy work for the predecessors to both the CIA and KGB.
What I found was the record of Hemingway
having agreed to a recruitment by the NKVD, which is the predecessor to the KGB. So that's kind of a pivotal moment in the spy business. It's like a sale to a realtor.
Haunted by surveillance, Hemingway tragically took his own life in 1961, never knowing just how real his fears had been.
I think he would have made such a marvelous old man. And that's what I'm most sorry for, that he did not have the chance to be a marvelous old man.
Dusan Dushko Popov. Dushko Popov wasn't just an infamous double agent. He was a master manipulator, a ladies' man, and a trickster who played the Nazis like a fiddle.
Dushko Popov, double agent, was born. Codename Ivan for the Germans, codename Tricycle for the British.
As a British spy, he fed misinformation to the Germans. This work gave him access to top-secret Nazi intelligence. His most crucial discovery came in 1941. Along with the information his sources in Germany provided suggesting Japan was planning a massive attack on Pearl Harbor, Popov warned that action should be taken.
On the 10th of August 1941, he took the equivalent of $40,000 from von Karstoff for Plan Midas and boarded a plane for the USA.
Unfortunately, J. Edgar Hoover was less than impressed. Dismissing Popov because he was a double agent, the FBI director ignored his warning.
Hoover believed that being a double agent made Popov doubly untrustworthy.
Months later, Pearl Harbor was in flames. Sinéad O'Connor. The 90s were chock full of iconic pop culture moments. Few were as controversial as Sinéad O'Connor's performance on SNL in 1992.
Everywhere is war.
There, she famously ripped up a photo of Pope John Paul II.
Fight the real enemy.
With the words, "Fight the real enemy," she called out the Catholic Church's rampant abuse of minors. The world of pop culture subsequently treated O'Connor as a social pariah. She was mocked, blacklisted, and ridiculed, even by fellow musicians.
It was funny because after the first song there was loads of people around and they all came into the dressing room and everything, but then after that there was nobody around. There was silence for about half an hour. There was nobody around.
Less than a decade later, the truth she tried to expose erupted into global headlines thanks to the Boston Globe's Spotlight team. By then, the damage to O'Connor's career was irreversible. The world eventually realized she was right, but history took its time apologizing.
And we can't heal ourselves unless we fight the right enemy, the right cause. It's no good just dealing with the symptom.
Claire Patterson. The scientific community knows Claire Patterson as the man who figured out Earth's age. He did it by examining lead content in the ground.
It was 4.5 billion years old. If that sounds familiar, it's because it's basically the number we still cite today.
But his greatest fight wasn't against time, but the very element he had dedicated his life to studying. In the 1950s and 60s, while measuring lead levels from various places around the globe, Patterson made a horrifying discovery. Modern humans could have over 1,000 times more lead in their bodies than our ancestors. The culprit, of course, was leaded gasoline.
In this paper, Patterson attempted to draw public attention to the problem of increased lead levels in the environment and the food chain.
When he blew the whistle, big oil and the lead industry came after him hard. They funded counter-research, blocked him from getting any more funding, and even tried to sack him. Patterson wouldn't back down. Thanks to his decades-long crusade, leaded gas was finally banned, reducing lead exposure and saving countless lives. John Snow. In the mid-1800s, cholera outbreaks were wiping out entire London neighborhoods.
Over 600 people died in just a few weeks.
The disease had been the bane of many of the world's cities for centuries, and the medical consensus blamed bad air or miasma. But Dr. John Snow thought otherwise. He noticed a pattern. Victims in a local neighborhood were clustered around a single water pump on Broad Street. Snow proposed a radical idea. The cholera was spread through contaminated water, not foul air.
And then the cholera bacteria began to multiply, and then people would ingest the water, which provides the human intestine the place where the bacteria multiply best.
When the pump handle was removed, the outbreak slowed dramatically. You'd think this would have convinced the authorities, but Snow had no such luck. His theory was dismissed, and the pump eventually reinstated. Years later, science caught up, and Snow was vindicated as one of the fathers of modern epidemiology.
John Snow had plenty of evidence to say that this water from this well contained the contaminant that caused the disease.
Martha Mitchell. Martha Mitchell was known as a bit of a gossip in Washington, and in this case, that was a good thing.
Well, sweetie,
I tell you what, if I'm doing anything wrong in this government, just tell me about it.
The outspoken wife of Nixon's Attorney General, Martha the Mouth, got wind of the Watergate scandal long before the press did.
Did you see what Martha Mitchell did? No, she called somebody. She called the New York Times.
She refused to be quiet about her suspicions, even calling a member of the press when she couldn't reach her husband. The White House scrambled to silence her, literally and secretly locking her in a hotel room while her husband played damage control. They told the public she was in a mental health facility, while the media mocked her and much of her family rejected her.
I'll tell them all. And you know what they're going to do? They'll probably end up killing me.
But guess what? She was right. Nixon's cronies had bugged, bribed, and burgled their way into political infamy. Years later, journalists admitted to the existence of what they called the Martha Mitchell effect, where they dismissed truth-tellers as delusional. In the end, Martha lost everything, but the whistleblower took Nixon down with her.
We're teaching the politicians to be straight and not crooked.
Giordano Bruno. Giordano Bruno looked at the stars and saw infinity. The 16th century philosopher dared to suggest that the universe had no center and was filled with countless other worlds.
Where he believed Copernicus's interpretation fell short, and what he wished to see rectified, was in his failure to recognize and propagate the obvious conclusion that what he had discovered disproved the notion of a finite universe put forth by the scholastic and Aristotelian minds, which hitherto dominated the academic hive mind.
The Catholic Church had a big problem with him. Bruno wasn't just burned at the stake in 1600, he was erased. His works were banned, and his rejection of multiple Catholic codifications of beliefs were labeled as heresy.
To this, Bruno sallied forth, a second Socrates, and exclaimed, "Perchance you, who pronounce my sentence, are in greater fear than I who receive it."
But time proved him at least partially right. Decades later, Galileo would face his own persecution for insisting the Earth wasn't the center of the universe. Unlike Bruno, he recanted and was spared the flames, spending the rest of his life under house arrest. Today, Bruno's vision of an infinite cosmos is the foundation of modern cosmology.
Bruno was not without his faults, but even so, he remains to this day a symbol of free thought and tolerance of differences.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Ignaz Semmelweis. Ignaz Semmelweis had some wild notions back in his day. Doctors, he believed, should wash their hands.
Although he couldn't explain why hand disinfection was so effective, his research in 1847 would go on to transform the way surgery is carried out, and infectious diseases are controlled today.
In the mid-1800s, obstetrical clinics were deadly places. New mothers died of childbed fever at alarming rates. Semmelweis noticed a fascinating trend. Maternity wards run by midwives had far fewer deaths than those run by doctors, who often went straight from autopsies to delivering babies.
He ordered the students to wash their hands in a solution of chlorinated lime before each examination. The mortality rate fell from 18% to 1%.
His solution was chlorinated hand washing, which actually significantly reduced the mortality rate once instituted. The medical community responded with rage, mockery, and rejection. Semmelweis was dismissed from his position, ridiculed into obscurity, and eventually committed to a mental health facility.
If you try to go against authority and convention, you can run into and make some enemies.
He died there in agony from septic shock. A contemporary, Joseph Lister, expanded on his work. This father of modern surgery was a trailblazer in antiseptic surgery, proving Semmelweis right. Which of these people do you think received the most unfair treatment prior to being proven right? Let us know in the comments.